Greater majority. The greater majority got at least a 90%.
Okay, let's talk about the answers. So for question number 1, the answer is E.
You helped me
That's a
think.
lot of pointless information, right? What would you say? Let's just take a step back. What would you say is the central argument? Don't read it or anything. Now that you've read the passage, what is the central argument of this passage? But it's more about making choices, right? So your memory is weird and it does things, but there's more to it about like what confirmation bias actually is, right? Yeah, Nathan?
I was just gonna say that's arguing that confirmation bias affects our choices. And
There we go. Confirmation bias affects our choices. By the very end of it, it's saying also that could possibly be dangerous, right? But for the most part, that is the central topic of this little passage. And so getting into like the etymology of the word, what confirmation bias actually, you know, where it came from is not important at all to the central message of the passage. So E, how many of you got that one right? Raise your hand. Excellent. Okay. Number 2 is C. Okay, tell me, how many of you got that one right? C. Okay, good. So the reason that we're going to trust Warren Buffett is not because, as a source, it's not because he was born in Omaha, right? It's not because he's a philanthropist even. Good for him, but that has nothing to do with his making good choices, right? But the fact that he's successful, that makes us want to trust him. Yeah.
I didn't pick C because I was deciding between C and D,
Okay.
and I didn't pick C because it says one of the most successful investors in history,
Yeah.
and I don't think that something in parentheses should be an opinion.
no, he is.
Oh, but he's one of the richest people in the world.
I know, but still, nonetheless, it's like it's not. I don't think it's something that should be put in parentheses. Like,
You
one of
think
the
it
most
should be more
successful-
central?
I think if they said like a successful investor, but adding one of the most successful investors in history.
Yeah.
I think it's too vague. And when you add all those words, it makes it sound more like an opinion rather than just a fact.
Yeah.
That's why I said a noted philanthropist.
Okay, because it seems more direct.
Yeah.
I think that for all of these passages for composition questions, they're all going to be about someone's opinion, the writer's opinion, and about the best way to support that opinion. And so look for a little less nuance than that. Look for the main topic and what choices are always going to support the main topic. Yeah. Yes,
And
Lily.
like, in that sentence, it says, it talks about.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly, yeah, exactly. So if he is making financial decisions and that's what we're respecting him for, then talking about why he's qualified to give us advice about financial situations would make sense. Yeah. Okay, and then number 3 is D.
What?
That is a process of elimination question. So I want you to take a second here, take 1 minute, go through, look at all of the options and decide why they all need to be eliminated, except for D. So
Did you
go
say
through
D
with
or
your
E?
partner, look and decide why they all need to be eliminated.
I'm sorry. That's the weird place to put a thesis. Why would they put a thesis there? Number 3 should be the thesis.
I hate that they teach us.
You wouldn't get a thesis point for that one.
No, that was a bad thesis.
Yeah, that was awful thesis.
Look at number 3.
But you're doing process of elimination, right?
Well, probably.
15 doesn't count.
Okay, I agree. It's not the very best thesis statement I've ever seen. But if you do process of elimination, none of them are about the main points of the argument except for sentence 11. So that just goes to show you that it's a good idea always to look at all the options that you have. The other thing that might trip you up there is that it's in the last paragraph, right? We, in our rushed timed essays, have been focusing on putting the thesis statement the last sentence of the top of the first paragraph, but that is not always the case. Thesis statements can go anywhere. I don't want you to take that and then use that on your essays, but technically they can go anywhere. And like, you know, when you're writing longer papers, a lot of times they go in the fourth paragraph, you know, maybe on the third page, they can go all over the place. So, how many of you guys got that one right? Raise your hand. Okay, so that one we were a little bit less successful on, but it looks like 2 out of 3 for most of us, which is awesome. So you can put that away.
I got a 0 out of 3 class.
So we're not watching a movie.
What?
You got a 0 out of 3?
Last,
Oh, last
this time I got 2
improvement.
by a bajillion percent.
Yeah. A
Because from
bajillion.
0 to 2, that's a lot of percentage.
Okay, you guys wrote an outline and thesis statement for this Lincoln inaugural address, rhetorical analysis. I am giving you a physical copy of this. And we're gonna look at it a little bit more carefully. This will be our last day to review rhetorical analysis. This is where you're really,
Are we writing an essay on this?
no.
Oh, sick.
Can we write an essay?
Then? No.
Yeah.
We're gonna look at it and like talk about it.
Okay.
All right, let me get your attention. Okay, so this is not the first time you have seen this, hopefully, because it's crunch time, so it is very important that you're doing all these assignments leading up to the test. Even if it is the first time you've seen it, though, we are going to look at this for 5 minutes. So whether you've read it before or not, we are reading this for 5 minutes, and you are going to try to find as many rhetorical strategies as you can in this piece of text. If you want, you can have your terms open and looking at them to try and, you know, name them specifically, but these can also be those kind of vague rhetorical strategies like imagery, you know, just anything that you can find and label to the side. Okay, I'm gonna time us and give us 5 minutes for this. Isaac, I know the Lincoln rhetorical analysis is available to you on that canvas. All right, now that you've spent 5 minutes with this very famous document, this probably isn't the first time, even, this year, like that you've seen this document, you've probably seen it, hopefully in other years, maybe for you seniors, hopefully last year. Now that you've spent some time with it, I want you to figure out the specific argument. So as I am reading rhetorical analyses, I am noticing that that is our main problem. It was our main problem last year as well. It's finding a specific argument in the text. This is not just a text about unification. It is more than that. It is specific qualities of the unification. So at the bottom of that page or at the top, somewhere where you have room, write down what his specific argument is. Nothing about the rhetorical strategy, just the argument. Okay, so we're going to figure out what the specific argument is, maybe by combining some people's ideas. So I'm just gonna call on people to tell me what the specific argument that they had was. Mallory, what specific argument did you have?
I don't know, something.
Okay. Okay, Sam?
That God is the unifier.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. What aspects of the text does this not yet get to yet, though? Yet. David?
The war.
Okay, good. So what is his argument about the war, do you think?
I wrote just in all that like war is necessary kind of thing, because he talks about how the North fights because they have to, and the South fights because they want to, and he also talks about how when he's talking about offense and stuff, he's kind of saying like, either way the war is needed. So, I don't know if I interpreted that right, but
You're
that's what I got.
Okay, awesome. Cooper?
He also kind of makes the point that there was not one completely correct side of the war. Each side was fighting for their own belief system, and when it comes to that, they both were going back to God and praying to the God of all the other, same God, same Bible, references that a lot. So I don't think there was one correct side of the war. And he's kind of talking about how we maybe did things because we thought they were right, but we need to get back on same track.
Okay, so there's a bit of a proposal argument too. We need to get back on the same track. Okay, I still think that there's more specificity to add to this argument. Lily?
People are more alike.
Okay. People more like than we realize. Luke?
I'm kind of more about how like if both sides don't like
Okay, so now we've got a kind of threat too. If both sides don't unify, then we'll fall. So we've got some effects of unification. Christiane? Okay, good. Past was rough. Future help us heal. Okay, what we are missing from this is slavery, which he talks about in this, maybe not explicitly. He doesn't say the South is guilty of slavery, but he does reference it, allude to different slavery. He says, you know, if we have to keep fighting until every drop of blood drawn with the lash shall be paid by another drawn with the sword. Those are references to slavery. So what is his argument about slavery in the passage? Or about the reasons for the Civil War? Because right now we are staying very neutral. I don't think Lincoln is like, both sides are completely equal here. Yeah, Carson.
He has a line. It says, these slaves constitute a particular and powerful interest, only that this interest was somehow the cause of the war. So nobody was gonna write it down and like directly say slavery was the cause of the war, but it's what everyone was thinking.
Yeah.
It was, what was.
And what he's sort of referencing there too is that the Civil War was caused by the political power of slavery. So it's not even about the economic concerns. What he's saying is that the South was afraid that if Black people voted, they would get out of power. Right? Anything else in the argument, Cooper?
Just backing up that last point, he does mention that the Black community was 1/8 of the population.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
he So he definitely cites it and says, this is how much people.
yeah, good. Okay, so that's a lot of argumentation in this. Let's see if we've got everything. Religion is a unifier, war is necessary. One completely correct, but both sides are fighting for their own belief system. We need to get back on the same track. Okay, awesome. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to revise what you put as your argument and make sure that you are hitting all the main points. Now, maybe that's not every single point up here on the board, but make your argument more specific to reflect how there is more specificity to this argument. So you're revising your argument. I'm going to write mine up here. All right, so I want to show you how your argument can be more specific. Now, this means that my argument's kind of long. I would have a separate sentence to talk about rhetorical strategies, but this is the kind of specificity you can get at in the intro to your essay. Both the North and the South have suffered in this war, and though one side is more fully to blame, both are culpable for the continuing evil of slavery. Since they share the blame, they can share in the healing process. So I didn't necessarily think that it was absolutely like a part of the argument to talk about religion. That's going to be one of my rhetorical strategies. You, I think, could include religion in yours. But do you notice how it is not just unified? It's not just let's get back together. It's not just war sucks. You know, it's always going to be a more complicated argument than that. You are looking for both explicit and implicit arguments in the text. Okay, is that part a little bit clearer now? So for example, for those of you, I know this doesn't apply to everyone, but for those of you who did the Susan B. Anthony essay last time, she is not just saying Susan B. Anthony is a great lady. She is saying, here is why Susan B. Anthony is a good model for you guys to follow in order to pass the 19th Amendment in the future. You know, there's a whole like series of arguments that's going on in that little passage. Okay, so now you have like a whole bunch of thoughts about the rhetorical strategies. We're going to list them all up here. All right. What were some strategies that you were seeing when getting use of that? Carson?
I forgot what this one's called, but it says, it may seem strange that any man should dare to ask just God's assistance in bringing their beard from the sweat of other men's face, but let us not judge. So he just brings it up and then it's like, oh, but we don't need to talk about that. We should be
Apophasis.
thinking about that.
Yep. It's like, is bringing it up to pretend that you shouldn't bring it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that little sly jab at the South right there that he's got. Yeah.
He's tying together religious rhetoric with secular rhetoric.
Yeah.
So he's taking it and saying this, and he's talking about how they're both trying to do things, but they're both going through the same means to kind of different things to each other.
Awesome. Yeah. And so he's using this, he's bringing up the religious rhetoric as a way of then showing that both are committed to a Christian God. And so both attempt to reach God in the same ways, right? So they're both praying. They might be praying for different things, but they are both sides are praying, which is their commonality. Any other rhetorical strategies that Lincoln uses? Christiana? Yes. Blood symbolism between lash and sword. Yes, sword. Good. What else? There's so much. Like every sentence in this has one of those Latin terms. So yeah, Carson.
For repetition, I noticed at the beginning of a lot of sentences, well, he never referenced the two like countries, I guess, as a whole. He always references them as separate. Like he always says neither, each, stuff like that. He
Yeah.
never references them as one together, which is funny because he never technically, I'm pretty sure he never declared it as a war. He declared it as some things that's technically not the Civil War, but that's what they're called.
It's like after the fact. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, something
interesting.
like
Oh, I didn't know that. You guys know more about Civil War than I did. So let's say this is referencing, you're saying each side separately.
Yeah.
But not,
He's trying to like separate his side, like the north from the south, even though after this speech in real life, he never explicitly did that.
awesome. So that he's kind of trying to clarify, we did have different goals. Maybe we share some commonalities, but there were different goals here. Yeah, Lily?
There's a comparison at the end of the paragraph where he starts the sentence by being like, both parties effective or like one of them rigorous.
Yes, do you know what that one's called? It's called an antithesis. So an antithesis is a grammatically parallel sentence with, but they are pitting two things as opposites. So it says both parties deprecated war, but it says one would rather make war and the other would accept war. So it's like, it's comparing make and accept to each other and kind of declaring them as opposites. Yeah, let's say you don't remember the word antithesis or you're not sure. To the side, I wrote juxtaposition / antithesis, so, yep. What else? How does he appeal to people's emotions? Let's look at how he builds pathos. What are some of the ways that he builds pathos? Nathan?
In the beginning, he talks a lot about, like I underlined, he says a lot of R's and alls and a lot of stuff about togetherness, and he talks about how I think, right here, the progress of our arms upon which all else chiefly depends is as well known to the public as it is to myself. He's saying a lot about how he's open and transparent and trustworthy.
Okay, good. I think these are two different things. I think right here, we've got this language of unification in the pronouns he's using, right? And then you also say that he hints that he shares all of these things, transparency. So a language of transparency that enables trust. Awesome. Ben?
I think that by bringing religion into it, it helps a lot because typically someone of not like
I agree. So I think that we are also getting into, this can also be a way that he is building ethos, which is his credibility. And I think religion is building pathos, because that's when you are speaking to your shared values with the audience. Super.
In the very first sentence, he begins and talks about, this is his second inauguration, there's less occasion than the first. And then he talks about how he's been given to, well, how he's been told to give an address like every week or so for the past forever. So there's little to no occasion for this. It's just another speaking. He doesn't have that much to say.
Okay.
So I don't know. It feels like he's trying to set up the tone there. I
Yeah.
just don't know what strategy.
Yeah, I totally agree. Look at these words. Constantly, every point and phase of the great context, it still absorbs our attention. It engrosses all of our energies. It's this feeling, I think, of exhaustion. I think he is appealing to his audience's exhaustion through these use of, I would say, I would probably just call them, what would I call it? I would call it exhausting. You know, to find the commonalities between them, are overwhelming, like words that mean like overwhelming. Okay, what other strategies does he use? Yeah, you know,
Is rhyming a strategy?
does he? Where's he rhyme?
It says, fondly do we hope, fervently do we pray, this mighty scourge of war might speedily pass away.
When you say it like that, it's got like the meter. Yeah. I have never realized that rhymes before. Okay, so why do you think he rhymes? Because that makes it sound like, I mean, he's not being Dr. Seuss here. Like, why would he do that?
I think he's saying that like, because he's rhyming pray and pass away about the war, I think he's like saying that everybody
Yes.
hopes the war is gonna end.
Awesome. Connecting rhyming words. You know what it sounds like to me? It sounds like a prayer. So he said,
Yeah.
you know, it's like, as I lay me down to sleep, I pray, and you know, it's like it's got that kind of meter that a prayer would have, and so it's almost like he falls into a prayer in that moment. It's awesome. Yeah, Lily.
Also alliteration.
Yes.
In line 9, it says still absorbs the attention.
Yep. Or the powerful and peculiar interest, or the fondly and the fervently. There's a lot of alliterations you could talk about why it connects those two words together. Not that the alliteration is trying to get us to remember it. That's really never a speaker's goal, is to try and get us to like the speaker. Lincoln wasn't writing this being like, aha, in 100 years, 8th graders are going to have to memorize this speech and this alliteration is going to help them. No, he's thinking about connecting two ideas together. Okay. Anything else that you're seeing in this? I see a few metaphors. The one that stands out to me is wringing their bread from the sweat of other man's faces. That seems like a metaphor to me. I see another very famous example of antithesis with malice toward none and with charity for all. With firmness in the right as God sees us right. So that first part is alliteration. Sorry, antithesis. I see a lot of parallelism in the way he sets up his sentences. I think this is pretty good to go on. So you would not talk about all of this in your essay unless you had 4 hours to write this essay. You're going to choose a couple of these things that you think are the most important for the argument that you identify. So if I look here, I'm like, all right, I'm talking about how they've both suffered more fully to blame. Okay, I know I'm going to use apophasis when I'm talking about blame. This is South's problem. But I am also going to use Christiane's point about symbolism when I'm talking about suffering. I'm going to use both of them being culpable. Yeah, the North let slavery happen just as much as the South did, maybe not just as much, but quite a lot. And they can share in the healing process. I want to talk about religion, and I am going to steal Enid's idea, although I would have never thought of it on the test. Or healing. All right, awesome. And then that will be my thesis statement. Starting with the argument, finding the points that help prove my argument. I feel like you're moving the other way sometimes, where you're finding the strategies and sort of randomly connecting those to the argument. find the argument first, connect the strategies based on what the argument is. Does that distinction make a difference to you? A little bit for some of you? Okay, so I'm gonna give you these sample essays for this one. These are the top 3 scorers, so we don't have a middle and bottom for this. I want to see good examples.
Are these RS?
No, you didn't write essays about Lincoln.
We didn't?
No.
Oh.
No, out loud.
Oh. I'm a bit there.
That's, 15 minutes after I have to wake up. Okay. It's good to know. All right, my printer's running out of ink, but I think you can see this.
Wait, so would this be like when he said every drop of blood on the last shall be paid, is that not a metaphor, but
It's kind of both. It's literal in this case because slaves were beaten by lashes, but it is also symbolic, metaphorical of all of the violence that has occurred under slavery.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, actually, I wanted to do one more thing before we get to this. I want you now to write a thesis statement, but I want you to collaborate on this. So I kind of showed you how I was going to do it. And now I want you to write a thesis statement underneath where you put the argument. And I think that I want you to, because this is sometimes it's difficult, but I think it helps out people who feel stuck. So I want you to write this together. I'm going to have you 3 from Lily back get together, write it. Emily, Carson, Tana, you guys write the thesis. You 4 right here are gonna write the thesis. Let's do you. That's good. You 5 right here.
oh gosh.
Let's do you 4 and Sarah. I'm gonna make this move over here. Do Aiden, Cooper, and Sarah 3, and then you 4 right here. Okay. So I want you guys together in those little groups to settle on the exact wording for your thesis statement, and everybody write it on the phone. Isaac, I'm sorry, you have to do it by yourself. Just write it in the chat box for me. A thesis statement, just the thesis. So that's a great clarifying point. Your thesis might be 3 sentences long when you get to this kind of specificity, right? That's fine, but just you're writing the argument and the strategies that prove the argument. No, you collaborate
And then we accept.
on the pink paper. I think the rate of that, it's below 1%. I want to say it's like 0.3% of us is getting 9, or I mean, it's very, very low. It's easier to get a 6 now than it was to get a 9 on the old rubric system. So this they saw as being just an exceptional work. So let's read the intro. 4 years prior to his second inaugural address, President Lincoln has given a speech about war, an impending civil war. Now, after 4 years of such conflict, the president is issuing a speech of reconciliation, trying to convince his people to come back together with their Southern brethren and try and heal the grievously wounded nation. A gifted rhetorician, the president used 3 primary literary tools to make his point. Parallel structure to illustrate similarities between Northern and Southerner, allusions to the Bible to highlight the Christian values so important to both, and personification, we can even put that up here, to paint the war as an evil enemy and the nation as a wounded friend. All right, discuss together the strengths of that thesis statement compared to yours. Is yours better than this one? Is yours worse? Does this one hit something that yours doesn't, etc.? Talk in your groups.
Mine's worse.
And Isaac, you tell me, you have this packet in the Canvas assignment. You tell me, is this thesis statement better, worse? What's it missing? What does yours have that it doesn't, etc.? Just write in the chat box.
in the second.
All right, let me tell you what their best sentence is in that paragraph. It says, while this obviously paints the South as the aggressors, it is far from a condemnation. Instead, it has the North sharing the responsibility for the conflict through their willingness to accept war. Why am I saying that's the best sentence of that paragraph? Yeah, Sam.
Because that sentence alone, it completes that section of the thesis, or their thesis section.
Yeah, can you explain what you mean by that?
Well, the first part of their thesis was to illustrate similarities between the North and the South. And she goes on to use a quote that someone could read as saying, "Oh, well, he's saying the South is bad."
Yeah.
But then she shows, or they show, how the North is all like he talks about how the North is also sharing.
Yes, absolutely. So this writer has chosen a quotation that someone might interpret to say, oh, this is setting up the differences between both sides through an antithesis. But he's saying it is actually parallelism here because it is showing, I mean, it's still antithesis, but it's also showing that the North is also culpable. They're also to blame for the fact that there is a war. Now, he wouldn't say that those two sides were equally righteous, but he is saying both sides are to blame for it, the fact of war. Right. And I love that this writer has pointed that out. I think that this paragraph, even though this person got a 9, which is a perfect score on the test, I don't think it's a perfect essay. I think this paragraph could do a little bit better about analysis. So I want you with your group to add a sentence to the side of this paragraph that provides some analysis. So think about the quotations that they are using. Think about what they're trying to say with those quotations. And how could they break apart that quotation just a little bit to provide evidence for their points? As a group, add that sentence to the side. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And you guys do that in the chat box for me. The Christian values shared by both sides is further emphasized. Now that's an agreement problem, but they did not hold that against him. That little grammar error is not going to prevent him from getting a 9. Is further emphasized by Lincoln through allusions. He says in the 3rd paragraph, let us judge not that we be not judged. This is a direct allusion to Jesus and his statement, judge not lest ye be judged. It reflects the Christian values of forgiveness, something North and South share, and that should certainly apply for both in their current situation. Lincoln also quotes the Bible twice in the 3rd paragraph in the sections, woe cometh and judgments righteous all together. You see how he kind of like just says, hey, look at these little areas of text. He doesn't have to quote the whole thing. That's perfectly fine. Both these allusions point to how the values shared by North and South apply to the current situation. With frequent use of he and him, Lincoln shows how the war may fall into God's plan. This encourages both sides to not lose faith and to bear in mind God's teachings should still be followed. All right, as a group, find that writer's best sentence in that paragraph and explain just to each other, you don't need to write it, explain why it's his best sentence. I'm just gonna say he from now on. I think this writer's a boy. Finally, Lincoln tries to personify both the war and the nation. I don't think he should have used the word tries, but that's okay. The former as a, what do you think that says? Wicked? Wicked enemy. The latter as a beaten and needy friend. This begins at the end of the 2nd paragraph where Lincoln says one side would not let the nation survive and the war come. Yeah, and the war came. The first quote paints the nation as a living creature whose existence was being threatened, while the second shows the war as an independent entity that came on its own, not brought on by either side. These personifications become even stronger in the 3rd and 4th paragraphs. Here, Lincoln states that that none expected the magnitude the war has already attained, again painting it as an independent creature with its own actions and desires. Finally, he expresses hope the war may speedily pass away, granting it that same characteristics of mortality he already gave the nation. In the 4th paragraph, Lincoln sums up his personification of the nation by urging others to bind up the nation's wounds. Again, he shows the nation as wounded and in need of our help. At the dawning of his 2nd term, Lincoln realized the necessity for the reunification of the nation. Using rhetoric, he appealed to the hearts and minds of the people and tried to mend the rift that had grown between the North and South. Okay, what I want you to do now as a group, last thing with this essay is rate the paragraphs. So we're rating the body paragraphs. There's 3 of them. Which one you think is his best, his second best, and his third best? They're all bests. Just put it to the side. 1, 2, and 3. Rate the paragraphs.
Honestly, I could go down on this one. This first one is the best, the second
I
one is.
agree. I think the first one's the best. I think it blows it up when it- Honestly, I think it went the best, like first, second, third. I think they progressively like slightly first, not really bad. Progressively gone first.
So, I agree.
Is there a multiple choice after school? on it?
No, it's just Fridays and before school.
Am I able to take an essay prompt home?
Yes, I can do that, but I'll only give you one at a time.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. I have to do all 3.
There's 4 total.
I have to do 4.
Have you done one of them?
No,
Then you have 4.
I have to do 4. I haven't.
Most of you go 10,
That one because it's a huge part of it is discussing it. Are you able to come before school? What about on Friday? Yeah, you gotta, to get the multiple choice credit, we discuss the answers. Next week's class. Yes.
Oh,
Speaking of that, we have the multiple choice scores for the big bang.
Yes, I haven't gone through and marked which ones you got wrong, but yes, let me get that to you next time.
you got at least one.
All right, can you guess the order I would put it in?
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3.
No, I think that third paragraph is the strongest.
Really?
I do. I think the third paragraph is strong because he is pointing out something that not everyone will talk about. He's talking about something like, the unification under God is what stands out the most about the passage. So I don't think you can just skip over that. But I think in paragraph 3, he's making very interesting points about this idea of it being a living creature, about this idea of the war, like the country us needing to bind up the nation's wound as like this thing we need to take care of, this living, breathing, fragile thing. I just found that very interesting. And I like the way that he is like picking apart certain words and telling me what is important about those different words. That being said, I think the whole essay is good, so whatever order you put it in is fine. It's subjective. That's my personal preference, but they're all strong paragraphs. So that one got a 9. Good for him. We have now looked at a lot of these essays. You can keep this. If you're still like, okay, I might not get a 9, but could I get second best score or third best score? You can have these. Second best score and third best, so this was a 9. The second essay got an 8, and the third essay got a 7. So these are the top 3 scores on that particular rubric. I would give this a 1-4-1 for sure on our new rubric. And then you can add the others. I actually think the next one's 1-4-1 as well. Okay, so you can put that away. You can put away Lincoln. Let's move on. Does anyone have any lingering questions about rhetorical analysis? You're feeling so confident. Okay, let's say 5 is like, I am feeling as confident as Dr. Gork in writing this rhetorical analysis, which is my favorite kind of essay. So I'm a 5. 0 is like, I have no idea. I know I'm going to fail this thing, and everything in between. Tell me how confident you feel. Luke, you should be higher than 2. Tiana, you should be higher than 2. Ben, we should talk if that's true.
No.
All right, okay, 3s, 4s, a couple 2s, okay. We are still doing rhetorical analysis in our review sessions now. So we've got until this Friday to do rhetorical analysis. If you are feeling at a 3 or less, let's get a couple more rhetorical analysis practices. We can talk about them too. And if you're feeling at a 4 or 5 by this point at rhetorical analysis, when you come in, I can give you whatever style prompt you want. Yes.
So for this kind of, well, I guess for all essays.
Yeah, shh, let me hear. Yeah.
Is it something you want to go for
writing more or writing better?
This is such a good question. Nathan asked, should you try and write more or should you try and write better? And I think the answer is more. I think that I have a few students that are trying to perfect every sentence as they go, and they are just not getting enough information on that page. For some people, I'm like, okay, you're rushing through this. You can slow down a little bit, but I don't think that's the case for any of my students this year. I think it's about writing more. So we spend a whole lot of time picking it apart, right, in class, and we write outlines and all of that stuff. My advice to you is annotate a little, get a very rough idea about what you're going to write about, and then just start writing and go with it. Whatever you write down for that thesis, go with it. Sam?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but they won't dock you for doing something wrong. They'll just report something right.
Yep, on this new rubric, they are going to give you all the evidence points and thesis points. You get points for doing them right at some point in that essay. It's not like if one of your pieces of evidence doesn't fit, you're going to miss points on that. The only way that you are kind of penalized for not doing things very carefully is on that sophistication point. That's a really hard point to earn. And so it's way more important to get all those evidence points. So the more you write, the better for the most part. Unless it's just like wrong. Unless you're like, Lincoln's talking about aliens. I don't know. Coronavirus is hard, says Lincoln. Then you'll miss points. But yeah. Yes.
So what's the best way to get a 4 on that part? Yeah, like,
On the rhetorical analysis.
no, like all your evidence points.
Oh, the best way to get a 4 is to do just what that kid did in his sample essay, which is direct evidence, always explaining why that direct evidence points back to that thesis statement.
You don't know like what the argument is very well.
That's so tough. Okay, so let's say it's like one of those prompts that's kind of like vague in its argument. It's tough, but you can still get evidence points, even if you're getting the argument totally wrong. They don't say like, you must get the argument totally right. So I would say, be as specific as you can be in the argument. Did you feel like the Susan B. Anthony one was tough?
I always never like get the full argument.
Yeah, so I think like try to always ask yourself when you find a general argument, ask yourself why this is true for this author. That'll get you to something more specific, and even if you're wrong on it, that's okay because at least you have a more specific guideline to go with.
Arguments are subjective.
Exactly. Yeah. So as long as you've got like something specific to hang on to, if you're missing a greater picture, you might miss a couple points, but you won't miss all the points. Yeah. Any other questions about rhetorical analysis? All right, let me tell you about your assignment for next time. So we're going to move on to argument. The main thing that we need to work on with argument right now is using good examples. So what I am seeing in some of the essays that we've done is that no one is using the examples we've discussed in class. And that's part of the reason that we read stuff in class is because I chose units that correspond, units I'm interested in, but also that correspond the best to the prompts that you're given. So for example, on the test that you guys did that some of you did the full test on a Friday, there was a question that asked about conformity in facts. And basically the quote said something like, we ignore facts because we want to conform. It's like about us choosing to conform over facts. All right, we have talked about a lot of texts in this class that are about facts and about wanting to conform, I think. Can you tell me about some of the texts that we've talked about throughout this year that have to do with factual information? And what is fact? Yeah, Cooper?
There was those people who talked about the whims and stuff and like doing what you think you want to do. I forgot what they're called.
Emerson and Thoreau and the Transcendentalists.
Yes.
Wow, you're taking us all the way back.
We read that one guy's document about how when you get told the opposite, it just you get more engrossed in it.
Ezra Klein's Why We Are So Polarized. and let's say you don't remember that, you at least remember that that idea exists. That would be a great example for this one. What else have we talked about, Luke?
Would like that Vietnam book.
Yeah.
It talks about how sometimes like ignoring the facts and just saying a story is better than maybe not so true.
Yeah, awesome. Yep. Okay, now what have we talked about in this class that has to do with conformity and our desire to conform? Yeah, right.
The Great Gatsby.
Absolutely. What else have we talked about in this class? Nathan? Yes.
A lot of the social media stuff talk
Mm.
about.
Yeah, social media stuff, like I think that Susan Sontag in her thing about photography talks about how it becomes social, right? Like we just feel like we have to take pictures or we're not human, you know? Or Gia Tolentino talks about how we want to perform that way. So there's a few there. So do you see how like you wouldn't even be able to talk about all of these in an argument essay? You don't have enough time. We have talked about so many texts in this class that you can pull from for your examples. So your assignment for next time, it's a lot like the rhetorical analysis thesis outline assignment. I've picked 3 argument prompts. I am hoping they are not ones you've seen before. If they are, someone email me, let me know. 3 argument prompts, and I want you to write the thesis statement that you would have for that prompt. And then I want you to break apart your thesis in topic sentences, you know, topic 1, topic 2, etc. Just like we normally do with breaking it logically. And then I want you to include the examples that you are going to use for each of your topic sentences. And I want you to try to focus on stuff we've done in class. But that doesn't have to be all of it. You can also use personal experiences, history, all of that stuff, but try in your outlines to use at least one text that we have talked about in class. Okay, any questions? Awesome. I know the review stuff can get kind of intense.